G'day, Stu from UAVfutures here, and today, well, I got two boxes in my, well, one in my lap, one in my hand, and what we're looking at, we're going to be reviewing this. Now, these are the GB190s, and Stuart, why do you have two, and why are you so excited? Well, a little while ago, a little bit of a backstory, I did a review for GearBest of the Dubai 210, and you guys really liked that, and that was a fantastic sort of value entry quad, and there was just some things about it, though. I wish the ESCs were a little bit better, and that was probably one of the biggest comments that I get as well. People seem to wish that it did have better ESCs, and I saw this one on their site. Now this is the GB190, and this is the full kit that contains everything, or the full quad kit, that's almost ready to fly, and that's got some really cool components in there. And then I saw this one, and this one is even better. It's a little bit more expensive. This is a different, I guess, like an upgraded version of the GB190, but the reason this is so important is because these companies are actually listening. So these big companies that are producing a ton of quads, because I see a ton of rubbish out there whenever, sometimes I'm always browsing for these things, but sometimes I'm looking through and I think, why did they put that ESC in there, or why is that motor in there, or why have they chosen that camera? So it really looks like we're getting a gradual progression, and they're still relatively cheap, from sort of some really good quads into even better and almost becoming like elite, or things that I would, if I went shopping, these are some of the components I'd put in. So I'm super excited that those big companies are actually listening to what we're saying in the hobby, and they're putting in things that we want to put in our quads. So they're actually providing us with I guess, a really cheap place to get all the things we want in a quad at a really decent price. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling. So this is a bit of a different review, because we're going to be looking at two quads at the same time. They're both GB190s, but they're going to have some different components in them. Anyway, let's get started. Rightio, so let's have a look at everything that comes in the kit, in the GB190 kits. So we've got a GEP frame, and then we've got some motors and a flight controller, and you notice that they're in the center right there, and then I have a whole pile of components over this side and a whole pile over here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to call this, this side is the standard, and I'm going to call this side the racing. So I'm going to call this the GBR kit, and this is going to be the GBS kit, or the GB standard kit. So that's how I'm going to make the distinction, because I do want to have a look at these parts side by side. All of it is pretty fantastic, but I think this side is even better. Right, so what you're going to get in both of your kits, you're going to get 4 ESCs, and we'll talk about all these in detail. So you're going to get 4 ESCs, you're going to get 4 motors in each kit, you're going to get an F3 flight controller, you're going to get a PDB in each kit, a camera, you're going to get a VTX with an antenna, and then you're also going to get a tri-blade prop. Rightio, so let's probably start at the most important part, and let's have a look at some of the common components. So we'll start off with the frame, and we'll move through to the motors and then the flight controller, and then we'll move out and we'll have a look at the ESCs and the things on each side of this sort of table. All right, let's start with the frame. Alrighty, so this is the frame. This is the GEP 190, and I think that's probably why they call it the GB190, because it is built upon this frame. And the first thing to note, that it is made for running 5-inch props. So it's 190 millimeters from motor to motor, and it's probably designed to run some 22 size motors, so some 2205s or something like that. And when you're spinning these props, you're not going to have very much clearance whatsoever between the actual where the prop is cutting and whereabouts the carbon starts. So if I have a look right here, if I line that up, that's probably not many mils right there. If I had an actual motor on here, I could tell even closer. Yeah, and you can see they've actually even cut off the sides of the carbon here to prevent any of that cutting out. And that's also why the standoffs aren't on the very outside, where it's probably stronger, because if they were any further, you would definitely be hitting that carbon. But a lot of frames are sort of rocking this 190 size now, and the whole idea is to get the biggest prop size you can on the smallest quadcopter, so the smallest profile. And I definitely think that this is a step in the right direction. Now we're going to break the frame down in a little bit and have a look at each of the individual parts, but I've got to say, I really like the look of this frame. Like, I really like, I guess, the cut and the style, and I think it just looks fantastic. What we're going to do, let's stick it on the scales and see how much it weighs. So just turn my scales on here. So, and this is without some of the other hardware parts in here, so I am missing a fair few screws and things like that, but it's coming in at about 94 grams. So if I had to estimate, I've had all the screws in there, I would probably say it would be around 100 gram frame in my sort of estimation. Alrighty, so let's have a look at the arm that comes with it. So it's coming, well, 3.9, a 4mm arm right there. So a very, very thick arm, which is pretty, you kind of need that on this frame because it's probably going to be going very, very quickly. And also it's not too thick just here. And I would be a little bit concerned, but because it's 4mm, I think it's going to hold up pretty well in crashes. You're not going to be breaking that anytime in a hurry. And because of that really low profile there as well, it's probably going to not have very much wind resistance. So it's really going to be able to slice through the air. Now this all goes together on sort of this bottom plate right here, and it simply screws into the bottom. What is a little bit different is there's no real bracing plate traditionally that I would have seen. So usually I think there's like a plate that goes on here and sandwiches the arms. In this one, they simply screw in straight from the bottom. Now on top of this plate right here, this is a 2mm plate. I think it's 2mm. Let's just double check that. So yeah, that's a 2mm plate there. And one cool thing I do like about this is they have this little piece right here, this little bit of aluminium. Can open it up and get it out. There we go. We've got this little piece here, and this is used as a bit of a brace to make it even stronger on there. So I really like how exactly where there's going to be a lot of stress and a lot of, I guess, breaking points on the frame, they've actually reinforced that with this little bit of aluminium. I've seen a couple of frames doing this now, and it's great to see its way making it down in sort of these more entry-level frames. Rightio, so here it is all put together, and it's got a bit of a smart design. You can see these 4 bolts right here. I haven't put all the bolts in, but these 4 right here are actually some longer screws. I think they're 14mm. They go all the way through, and that's where you're going to sit your PDB and your flight controller, and that's going to be in a very, very clean little stack secured to the bottom of your frame. And it really comes in 2 sections, because once you've built this bottom section, then you've got this top little pod right here, which is secures very smartly straight into these standoffs, and that is where you're going to house all your FPV cameras and or your FPV goodness up here, possibly your receiver as well. So it sort of comes in 2 sections, and it makes building very easy as well, because all you have to simply do is wire all that stuff up with your ESCs, flight controller and PDB, and then all you have to do with this little sort of plate just here is run up a few cables for your FPV camera and your VTX, and then simply screw it down. So I really like the way that that sort of comes together, especially if you're one of these first time builders buying this kit. I really think that that's going to help you. You want things to be as simple as possible, so by being able to do it in 2 parts, I think that really should make the build flow a bit more smoothly. Rightio, let's have a look at another component, and let's look at the flight controller in both these builds. Rightio, and the board that comes with both of these GB190 kits is the SP-F3 flight controller. Now these are a pretty awesome little flight controller. They're rocking, they're an F3 one, so they're a very, very fast board, but they do have these little ports on the outside, which some people have reported them snapping off. It's never happened to me, but I definitely agree that it would be better if they had direct solder points on here. Maybe something like the Kahoot flight controller, Kahoot flight controller or something like that. It's really easy to flash Betaflight to these, and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. It's got your little boot pads just here. You can hook up a range of sort of serials and other things to here, little serial satellite receivers, S-bus receivers, or PWM or PPM receivers straight to here. And then you've got all your ESC pads at the front and your USB on the side. And when you're building, just a reminder, make sure that you can access the USB port, because the last thing you want to be doing is taking it apart to plug in your USB constantly. Rightio, and then the third and final part that's I want to talk about that's common to both of these is the motors. Right, so here's the motors, and they're the Emax red bottoms, the 2300 kVs, 2205s, and these are pretty much like a gold standard. There are more powerful motors out there nowadays, but for a long time, these were definitely king. They pump out a ton of thrust, and they're very, very reliable. A lot of people have good results with these. I've used these on a ton lately in a lot of my builds, and I'm really, really enjoying flying with them. I find them really smooth and really responsive, especially when you hit that throttle. You definitely can puff a battery or two if you're not careful, because they will suck down so much juice, and they're very, very killer motors. So really, really good, solid choice of motors, and I'm really happy that they're in both of these GB190 kits, because yeah, you can't go wrong when using these motors. Just another thing too, I think the 2300 kV version is probably perfect for a 5-inch build. If you were going with a 4-inch build, I would probably be recommending maybe going the 2600 kV, but it's good that both of these are going to be swinging 5-inch props in both of these, so the 2300 is a solid choice. Alrighty, so now we come to some points in distinction. So over this side, we've got the standard, and on this side, I called it the GB190, I guess the racing version, or the R. And on the standard, we've got the Little B's 30 amp ESCs, and over this side, we've got some new XS 30 amp BL Heli S ESCs from DYS. And just because this one's standard, I really don't want to disregard these, because for the longest time, I guess the longest reign of good ESCs, as far as I can remember, was the Little B's. Everybody used the Little B's for the longest time, and I still know a lot of people that fly with these. I believe the 30 amp ones, they can even run multi-shot, so very, very fast ESCs. And I actually did a build where I'll leave a link somewhere in this description, like 100 kilometer an hour. It was 100 kilometer an hour FPV quadcopter or racing drone or something like that. So and these are the ESCs I used on them. Now they can take from 2 to 6S LiPo, so a ton of juice can be pumped in here, and all around just a pretty reliable ESC. But the times have changed a little bit, and a lot of people are moving to a BL Heli S and getting fantastic smooth throttle response, and they're really, really solid ESCs. I'm loving using BL Heli S. I haven't actually used the XS 30 amp ESCs, but I know that DYS in the past has made some pretty good ESCs, so I'm very, very keen to try these out. The size difference is a little bit different as well. You can see just here just how much bigger the one, I guess, in the standard kit is. So I'll be really interested to see how these go. One notable distinction just here on the outside, regardless of if it's BL Heli S or not, is that it has these little solder pads. So it really annoys me how I've got to take off these wires and then solder up my motor wires. So I'm looking forward to using these pads as long as they don't snap off. So hopefully these should be a little bit easier to solder to. I just hope that they're a little bit more reliable. Probably a good thing to do. Oh, they've even got some solder pads on the underneath. That's handy if you want to solder them in upside down, because I've done that on some of my builds. But it would probably be better if they just had this part was filled in, so they still had the tabs, but they weren't separated parts of the board. They could just have, I guess, a little spacer between them to make it even stronger. But overall, I think both fantastic choices of ESC, but these ones should be stellar. Really, I guess, current technology. Rightio, so now on the other end of those ESC and motors is the props, and you notice a very big difference here, I think, in terms of what props we're going to be using. Both of these are 5-inch, both tri-blade, but on this side we've got some bullnose props, and this was on the standard, and on the racing edition, I guess, or the GBR, we've got some little tapered ones at the end. And traditionally, you do get a lot more thrust out of these, a bit more brittle, but as I fly more and more, I'm finding it much smoother to go on these sort of tapered end props. Now, these are the OC Day brand of props, and look, they're okay, but they're not the best. They're not as durable as Dow. These look like the King Kong props as well, so I've got some King Kongs here. This is the one that came in the kit. Didn't have any labeling or anything like that, but they look almost identical to the King Kong props. So I'll be very interested to see how they hold up. It's a bit of a shame. I wish in the next kit they would put some Dow props in there, because in my opinion, I love flying with Dow because they seem really, really, I guess, robust and still offer good performance. I feel like the King Kongs bend a little bit more than the Dow. I find myself replacing the King Kongs more than the Dows. But regardless of both of these, you are going to get some fantastic thrust numbers. This one's probably going to be a little bit more efficient, and you're probably going to get a bit of a higher thrust off this one right here. Alrighty, now powering all this stuff is going to be your PDB. Now these are very, very similar. Both of these came with the frames. Now this is the GEP RC PDBs, and I think this is version 1. I don't think this one has a version number on there at all, so this is probably 0 point something. What I do notice, the differences that I can see, is that the pads are separated on this board where they're not on this one, and the only other difference that I could really see is that's going to be useful to me anyway, is that on this board, this is the on the standard, you've got a 12 volt at the back and some a 5 volt at the 2 5 volts at the front, and on this one they've spaced it out, so you've got a 5 volt and a ground at the front, and a 5 volt and a 12 volt at the front, and a 5 volt and a 12 volt at the back. So that's going to make it a little bit easier when you're wiring it up and you're trying to organize your wires and things. You don't want to run it across the board, so I really prefer this one. I think that's a good little addition as well, and that shows some development on GEP's behalf right there. But just how they've got both of these at either end, so you don't have to run any wires across the board. Not too exciting those, but it is worth pointing out those distinctions. I'd be happy to build with either of these, but I thought it'd be worth pointing those out anyway, so I'm going to be using one of these in my builds. Rightio, so let's have a look at the FPV side of things, and there is some things that the standard I think does better than the racing, but overall I think the racing has upgraded once again to make it even better in this GB kit. Alrightio, so they're both going to come with some TS58 VTXs, but this one is a 600 milliwatt VTX and this one is a 25 milliwatt VTX. Both of those are RP SMA, which is a little bit annoying for me because a lot of my Fat Shark antennas are SMA, but the reason I think this one might be more beneficial to most people, if you can run it and if it's legal in your country, is because this one's on 600 milliwatts, whereas this one's on 25 milliwatts. This one will be perfect for racing because I know a lot of race events require you to have 25 milliwatts, and I know that's what's legal in Australia. But this one's going to be pumping out a much stronger signal, but it also might flood some other pilots around you. So if you're flying by yourself or alone, this one's probably going to be the better choice of a VTX. But if you're racing, and that's probably what this kit's intended to do because it is a solid piece of kit in the racing version. Well, that's what I call it, the racing version. That's probably why we're on 25. What I probably would have liked to have seen in another one is if they had a 200 milliwatt version, because I think that's a really nice fine balance between not stomping over everybody's signal, but still not losing signal as well, not having too weak a signal. Right here on the outside, you can see a very obvious difference right here, and this is the antennas that come with them. In the first GB190 kit, you didn't get any sort of special antenna. You just got one of these rubber duckies, which is look, it's not great. I know whip antennas have been okay in the past. I know some people, but you probably don't need these big SMA or connectors or anything like that. If you're going to use one of these whip antennas, just direct solder it on there because that's going to save you a ton of weight. And over this side, I'm really happy with the antenna chosen in this kit. Now this is the Omway multi-directional Omni antenna, and this was one of my first videos actually. I actually did a bit of a shootout where I compared about 5 or 6 videos, almost about 8 months ago or 9 months ago or something like that. And I found that these antennas were awesome value, so I'm really happy to see that making its way into sort of this kit, because I think this is going to be a fantastic antenna. And look, the color sort of matches the frame as well, so I'm sure that was just a coincidence, but it looks very, very cool. Right here, let's talk about these two FPV cameras. Now in the standard kit, you've got this camera here, and you know what? I have no idea what the name of this one is. So I know it's a 2.8mm lens, but other than that, it looks like a CCD camera, but I can't really tell you too much about it whatsoever. So there's that one. So I guess there's that camera. It doesn't even tell you what the voltages are on the back or anything like that. I'm sure that it's going to come with some cables that I'm not sure what you'd have to hook this up to, whether it be a 5 volt. I'd really have to look online and try and find some schematics to see what one to hook that up with. But on this side, we have something very special. Now, this is a high quality camera. Like most of these parts in this build, you're really using some good top end components or some very, very decent components. So we've got a Runcam Swift here. I know the Runcam Hour gives some fantastic night vision, and a ton of people I've seen flying around with these. So this is like the HS1177. It's going to fit very, very nicely inside any of those mounts for those HS1177s. What size lens comes on this one? I think that's a 2.8 size lens, so the same sort of size in here as well. But one cool thing, it comes with a ton of sort of options that you can use to mount this into your frame. So inside, it came actually in a nice special box. I'll show you the box. Rightio, it actually comes in this huge box here, and under here there is a ton, excuse me, open this up. There's a ton of little mounting options and cables and cords for your OSD and all those sorts of things. So that is fantastic that you actually get one of these Runcams, because I'm very excited about putting that into my build. Right, so there's a bit of an overview of everything that comes in the kit, and I definitely think that it's great to see the way that Gearbest took, look, this is a pretty amazing kit as it was, and they took, I guess, some consumer feedback. I know that I was like, gee, this is good, but I wish these things were different, and it's great to see that revision make it into this side of the frame. So whatever I would call this, the GB90R or something, that's what I would name it for the racing. So it's fantastic to see that they're moving into this side of the kit. But with all that said and done, the important part is, how's it all going to fly and how's it all going to go together? Just from experience, I really think that this thing is going to be absolutely killer, so I can't wait to put this stuff together. And I guess that's what I'm going to have to do in part 2 of the video. So I'm going to be building this side of the kit, and we'll just see just how well it goes. Right, so there it is. There's my part 1 of the review of the GB190 from GearBest, and we've had a bit of a look, I guess, at the sort of earlier version and what I'm going to call the race version. I think I like this frame so much, and I guess the little kit that comes with it. I'm thinking about doing a build guide for this one. I know I've done a ton of build guides in the past, but I think I'm actually pretty excited about this one. So we're going to be putting it together, and I'll be building it up. Stick around, because in part 2 of the review, I'll show you how it came together, and we'll take it out and give it some flight footage and a bit of a thrash around and see just how it goes. Anyway, subscribe for more FPV related content, and as always, happy flying. Pretty pumped about the build guide for this one actually, because I think it's going to be awesome.